Hi everybody, it's Stay Thrive and welcome back to another video. Today I will be doing a review of An Unkindness of Ghosts by River Solomon. I'm not gonna spoil too much in this video. I'm just gonna kind of go over my overall rating, some of my favorite quotes, and just go from there, guys. So overall, I would rate this book an 8 out of 10. The book has a lot of layers and a lot of depth to it. It has a very unique way of telling the story of oppression. There's some literal references to systematic oppression and the impacts of systematic oppressions, but then there's also metaphorical references throughout the story. Some of the metaphors, I'll be honest, I didn't initially get, but after doing my own research and reading more about other people's thoughts on the story, I started to have a deeper understanding for the metaphorical references that the story has to oppression. The reason why I didn't rate this book 10 out of 10, because this was a pretty interesting book. And like I said, it had a very unique way of telling the story of how systematic oppressions hold back people. At the same time, there were some very, very technical parts because Esther is in the medical field and she goes into depth about like medical conditions and stuff like that, which I'm not too interested in. So at points it did kind of lose my attention. To me, this is definitely a book that you might want to reread a couple times to fully understand and grasp. The ending though, guys, it broke my heart. I'm not like a super crier for books, but this ending, it had me tearing up a little bit, guys. The book broke my heart in a way that my heart has never been broken by a book. But yeah, that's pretty much my thoughts on the book. Leave your thoughts on the book if you've already read it. And then I'm gonna go over like some of my favorite quotes and knowledge bombs that the book has. If you see me looking down, I'm just looking at the quotes on my Kobo. So Giselle said, it will all go to dust one day. Anyway, the sooner you know that, the better. Why do you want so bad to be remembered? And by who? They won't ever know you, not as good as I do. I really like that quote because everybody tries so hard to be remembered. Like, it seems like for a lot of people that is their goal, is to be remembered, to have a legacy. But at the end of the day, the people that it's going to be most important to is the people that know you. And at the end of the day, like, you aren't ever going to be remembered forever, which I think this point hits hard on, because eventually we will all cease to exist. I really like that quote. It reminds you to really, treat the people that matter in your life well, because they're going to be the ones that remember you and that you have the most impact on. Even if you are remembered as such, Martin Luther King, they're only going to remember you however history is told, and it's usually one-sided. It isn't going to show your true depth of character, the good parts of you, the bad parts of you, So that line by Giselle just really hits home for me. Another line that really hit home: you guess hemophilia because you assume the bruises and bleeds are connected. They are not. The nosebleed is the result of hereditary disease, and the bruises are results of abuse. The point is, what do you do when you don't have the details? Do you interrogate? Do you examine? Or do you just settle for the obvious answer? And then they go on to say, any random assortment of dots could be connected into a picture, whether there was an actual picture there or not. I thought that quote was very true, and I think that's something that, us as humans, we just typically do when we notice patterns and things like that. We just kind of assume things. So I like that quote because it kind of encourages the readers and people in general to just step back and not necessarily assume, but to try to dig a little deeper and see why things are connected, or if they even are connected. Another quote that I liked, I can't remember who said this in the book. I learned from him that sadness is the hardest thing to breed out of the bloodline. I think that quote just speaks for itself. I think it speaks to generational trauma. I think it speaks to how the impacts of systematic oppression can potentially impact the next generation and the next generation and the next generation until it's like a repeating cycle. This is another quote that I really liked, or that really resonated with me. Though her surroundings amplified her fears, Esther knew now, years later, that Giselle's phobias and anxieties reached into the territory of psychosis. A paranoia difficult to identify because so many of Giselle's concerns made sense. I like this quote because it really challenges the thoughts that society has about mental health. And, you know, so quickly we're often labeling people with psychotic disorders or just different mental health disorders as crazy. But this quote acknowledges that some of the underlying thoughts and beliefs underneath the mental health concern, underneath the mental health concerns stem from something that's very real to the person that has, these mental health disorders, because they've had so much trauma, that their body is just basically overreacting or reacting in a way that it thinks will keep the person safe. But yeah, a lot of times we think that they're crazy, that people with psychotic disorders or mental health disorders, when there is some layer of truth to what they're saying. Esther understood now that kings don't die. Even when they do, they have sons, and those sons have sons, and so on. Was that what Lieutenant meant? The sovereignty is forever? Again, I think this is another quote that kind of speaks for itself. You might think that you can kill the bad guy, or racism, or these different, negative systems. But at the end of the day, they just keep going, because there's always going to be somebody that keeps these systems, going and upheld and perpetuating these ideals and these systems. And then I'm not going to go into this one because, like I said, guys, I'm trying not to spoil the story. But this was part of the scene that kind of broke my heart. What a small thing she had to ask for: to be left alone, to be allowed the solace of her own atoms. Those are my favorite quotes from the story. What are your favorite quotes or knowledge bombs from the story? Let me know what I should read next, and thank you guys for watching. Bye-bye.